Hey everybody, how's it going? Good morning. Thank you for coming out to this. We're going to talk about video attribution and the current state of where it is with podcast advertising as it pertains to YouTube buys. My name is Glenn Rubenstein. I am the founder and CEO of Adopter Media. We are a dedicated agency specializing in podcast ads and YouTube endorsements. And if we could just go down the line here and have our panelists each introduce themselves, we'll get started.
Sounds good. Hey everybody, I am Pat Schmidt. I am the VP of Partnerships from Podscribe. We're a omni-channel measurement and attribution solution but we specialize in all things audio. So really excited to talk to you guys today.
Wait for the latecomers. Oh, am I on? Excellent. Hi, everyone. Actually, this name is only very recently archived. I'm now Lucy Verby. Hello. I run strategy training. I'm ex-agency, worked as Chief Strategy Officer at PhD over in the UK here, and I'm a huge podcast nerd, and I've worked with clients on it a lot, so I'm excited to talk about this today. Thank you.
And hi, everybody. I'm Andy Goldsmith. I'm the President UK of Audio Boom, which hopefully a lot of you guys know who Audio Boom are.
Great. So let's start. Pat, if you could give everyone a bit of a 30,000-foot view, what is working for brands right now in audio measurement?
Yeah, I think audio measurement has really come a long way. I think we're finally starting to be able to put ourselves in the same playing field as digital, which I think, as we all know, is probably the gold standard in terms of the number of data points, number of insights that you can ultimately get. I joined Podscribe because of the data and insights that can be provided specifically for the audio space that has, kind of been one of those things that's been challenged. And we ultimately do that by utilizing IP addresses, which you'll hear a lot of today. And
Lucy, to that end, with UK brands that you've worked with, what is the most common attribution setup? In the US, obviously, we're very accustomed to IP matching. We have Nielsen and other providers that give us consumer data with GDPR and the like. How have you found that for UK-based brands?
As you mentioned, you've already said it, GDPR obviously has a particular bent in this market and determines specifically, I would say, what that looks like in terms of what you talked about as digital metrics. I would say that being true, we have some of the most established long lead marketing theory, setup, policies that really help us. I would say ground probably less in deterministic data and much more in kind of probabilistic proof. So, you look at ThinkBox or Barb, if you're talking about video as part of a component part of a wider ecosystem, we have so much historical proof that goes beyond necessarily saying, yes, we can confirm that that exposure led to that sale necessarily, but an opportunity instead to be able to look at much more consistent data. And I guess we can't be back where we were in 2015, which to some people is a great shame. But at the same time, we do have an enormous wealth of data with which to be able to determine attribution. Gold standard, as you talked about it for a brand, everything from MMM through to something, kind of some of the data points that you're maybe now getting through smart TV, for example, and being able to connect that directly to sale in some cases. But it's, I would say, about looking at the full wealth of the measurement ecosystem rather than about one specific data point.
And Andrew, what are you seeing advertisers demand on the network side before they're spending?
Wow, that's quite a lot. I think that advertisers always want the moon on a stick, don't they, in terms of outcomes and performance. I think that we've got a point here where there's an expectation of the attribution and what you can get from this world of podcasting. And I think that we come up against a slight problem in that we are measured or expected to perform against other media in a way that we don't work in that way in podcasting. The audience and the way advertising works in podcasting is very unique. And I think that what we get a lot of expectations from brands and advertisers saying, I want to have the same level of insight and performance measurement that I get from other media. And we've got to remember that although we're almost treated like a digital media, we're not really a digital media. We're kind of a mix between on and off line. We're kind of like a mix between a push and a pull media. So we do get a lot of expectations. The reality is that brands are stepping into it because there's a known performance that comes with it. But actually, in all honesty, I think brands are moving with it because there's a level of trust and within the media, but there's a disconnect between that and the actual data that they're expecting.
Well, that makes sense. I completely agree with you on all of that, and I think that if we're operating, I mean, obviously people keep talking about we're now moving towards outcomes. We've been operating in the so-called attention economy for quite some time now. And there's a beautiful stat, which is kind of how I used to sell my clients, which is that when somebody has been given a recommendation for a podcast, they will give it 15 minutes of listening time before they will determine whether or not they're going to continue to listen. Like, that's with some completely new IP. That's a podcast that they've never listened to before. You know, we're in a space, as you guys know better than most, but like podcasting in a space where the attention opportunity is about the context. You mentioned the word trust, Andy.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much opportunity for impact beyond, I would just say, as I say, that kind of deterministic piece, and instead being able to say it's attention, but within a context which adds so much more to it as well. And I think if we think about all of that as a way to be able to say, if you can connect that back to your business requirements, which of course you can, then great.
Yeah, I think the struggle is always figuring out how to capture it more. We hear from our brands. In our agency, we work with about 24 brands. We do over $30 million a year in spend across podcasts and YouTube. But with host-read endorsements, we get from our brands a lot saying, well, the CEO knows that people say they heard you on Joe Rogan or Pod Save America or Midas Touch. But they want to find a way to get direct measurement of it. And with pixel attribution, our brands really love it. In full disclosure, we work with Podscribe. I'm an advisor to the company, and additionally, we measure all of our campaigns through them. And part of the reason why this IP matching works is that promo codes at best are capturing maybe half of the sales that you're tracking with promo codes and URLs. And that's with like a really good offer. In many cases, there are studies have shown it can be far less than that. So pixels capture that full funnel. But now with this leap of video growth, whereas the industry, especially some of the larger host endorsement ads, the larger shows are truly simulcasts, we're seeing that if YouTube is making up more than 50% of the audience, having audio as a smaller slice of that presents a lot of challenges in getting brands to really believe the full measurement beyond those offer codes and URLs. So Pat, because you deal with this, where do we currently stand with video pixel attribution, with Apple Video, with Spotify Video, and then of course the giant YouTube?
Yeah, it's not great. We don't stand anywhere with them. Right now we're kind of utilizing a lot of workarounds. Apple's HLS is going to be pretty interesting. It's very new. I think there's a lot of great signals in terms of where it could potentially evolve to. That said, we don't have a lot of truly concrete sort of details about what it's going to mean for us. When it comes to YouTube and Spotify, it's a different story. We don't have the ability to track a lot of their video efforts utilizing our pixel, so we have to basically find workarounds to do that. We do have, with Spotify, we have the ability to do sort of like an S3 drop that allows us to get the number of plays, and then we can model the performance based on that. And we can do the same thing with YouTube via their API that we have set up. But again, that takes a little bit of a leap of faith in terms of modeling that data, which is not as strong as a direct pixel-based attribution.
Andrew, you host huge simulcasts from Tim Dillon, Brittany Borowski, and the Audio Boom roster. What have you heard officially from the YouTubes and Spotifys about third-party video pixels?
Truth, nothing, or very, very, very little. We know that there's a huge opportunity here. We know that the announcements that came at the back end of last year from YouTube, the move from Spotify over the last couple of years, and obviously recently with Apple, that they're going to make significant or going to open up significant opportunity for us. But in terms of what that means, we've had very little in terms of expectations or specific deliverables from any of those parties. The other thing that I think is a slight problem is we don't actually know the timeline, really, of when this is going to open up to us. The measurement piece and the attribution area. We were told, summertime, H2, but there's no dates being set. So we're trying to get ourselves ready, but we don't know when the opportunity really does start to kick in.
And you're talking the sponsored segments, the dynamic ad serving on
That's
YouTube.
Right.
So for those that don't know, YouTube soon is going to unlock the ability for YouTube creators to essentially go into their old episodes, put in ad markers, take out old ads, and put in new host-read video-based advertising. This is interesting and perhaps in many ways opens more questions than answers. Top of my mind is if YouTube acknowledges it as a sponsored segment, does that mean YouTube premium viewers won't be served it? In which case, I think we're going to be missing out on
lots
the best
of unknowns.
audience.
Again, lots of unknowns.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of assumptions that we would make, and we might be wrong in making those assumptions. And I think there's some assumptions that some of the execs over at YouTube are making as well, that we understand what's going to be happening, when the reality is that we just need clarity.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I'll double down on that as well. I think in this time when we're seeing a pretty important shift in terms of the way that listeners are consuming this content, we're seeing a big growth in terms of video consumption. It's important for everyone to sort of, I think, be a little nimble. And we always try to do that and try to figure out ways to sort of think on our feet, see what's available, and then try to create solutions accordingly. It's not, not every brand can do that. But for those that are willing to try to figure out a solution, work with us, we're always kind of willing to work as well. That's where we're going to, I think, make the progress that's needed to be able to measure these things appropriately.
And Lucy, I'd be curious your perspective on this. I would say that because brands believe in the space, the clients I deal with and the advertisers I deal with, I think the lack of video attribution is probably their biggest gripe, but it's not a deal breaker. If you said, well, do you not want to do it, then they'll be like, oh, no. We still want to do it. We just wish we could measure it better.
Oh yeah, it was ever us, and apologies to anybody who's sitting here from Google or YouTube, but that's always the way that clients approach anything with Google, which is just, we recognise that it has to be on the plan, but we also recognise that their measurement systems are primarily set up to serve themselves. And so I think that the gripe piece is absolutely right. It's not a blocker because it can't be a blocker. Yeah. Because to suggest that at this point that you would start to remove YouTube from the plan, as much as a bullish move I think it would be, and we've certainly seen agencies come up against, I would say, when metrics have shifted, your point about being nimble, I do think that the clout of kind of big agency groups has leveraged some impact, which I think is super important, but it hasn't necessarily stopped it in its tracks. And to be frank, kind of rightly, to be able to say that actually just, I'm very much here for the attribution as we're talking about, but to determine that would allow for an entire channel to be completely dismissed, I think would be difficult and relatively unfair as well on the creators who, to your point, are really just trying to make the best use of the platform that they've built up, monetize their content for the best use, and also, quite frankly, refresh, it sounds like, with the opportunity, some of the work that they've done so far, bring people back into their own ecosystem. So yeah, I think you're right. It's not a blocker. It's just a kind of usual eye roll, which is how the majority of the agencies approach them.
But Lucy, you mentioned the creators there, and I think that I think they are central, right, to the conversations that any of us are having, right? Is that so? And again, Glenn, you've mentioned, and Pat, the growth that we're getting into our content that video is bringing in. YouTube is a brilliant gateway to opening up audiences. The problem with audio only has always been discoverability. Video is a huge part. The audiences are there, the context is there, the engagement there, the attention is there. The disconnect is what the brands kind of want. And the problem that we're in at the moment is that it's blocking spend coming back and flowing back to the creators. Spend or support from advertising that they do genuinely, they should be getting, and it's not flowing through. And I think this is about how do we unblock it. But at the heart of this is the creator.
I will be curious to see what the Unilever work does. With them putting over, I think 50% of their market. Apologies if anybody has the right stat. 50% of their marketing budget now towards creative work, and for them to be able to leverage the opportunity at such grace, it's being able to hope. Obviously, kind of creator talent agencies exist. You also have, you guys, the people in the room, for example, who are able to speak on behalf of the creators themselves. But I'm really interested in is it a creator union that I want? I'm not sure. Effectively being able to kind of join up the combined clout, creativity and power that so many brands I think have been approaching on almost a pay-as-you-go basis to date. We want you to look at our product, can you sell it for us? And the Unilever piece felt much more like it was like, now we have ongoing storytelling, proper narratives, and therefore as a result, what does that unlock in terms of attribution? You're less determined for success based on did this one campaign perform, and much more about okay, what does the whole partnership look like over say 2 years? I think that as an attribution driver is such an interesting space to move into.
No, I agree, and I think especially with post-purchase surveys, there's a lot that can be done. But one thing I want to mention, I'm sure a lot of you saw the stat a few weeks ago, MoffettNathanson named YouTube the world's largest media company, passing Disney. 36 billion plus in ad revenue and a billion plus monthly podcast viewers. I think that, with the creators there is sway. What I wonder though, is you say they're such a big company, why would they be interested in attribution? And I do want to point out that Apple, not doing so bad financially either, is interested in this HLS and dynamic ad serving and making a small CPM off that. So I think if Apple sees money there, I think for YouTube, your creators might not like it. YouTube, look, I've been involved in the YouTube space for 20 years. 20 years ago, YouTube wanted to bring ad deals to creators and find a way to take like 50% of the money. I think that video attribution is probably something, if it unlocked billions of dollars more in spend, that creators would be okay with. But I think that with creators only have so much sway, and there is no collective bargaining or collective bullying that can be done there. So let's talk a little bit about solutions with the time that we have left. I know, Lucy, what have you found has been like the most creative way that people have tried to attribute things directly to podcast and creator video?
You already mentioned it. I mean, as I say, I think it's the difference between podcast and its direct link to, say, a sale, for example, and podcast as a part of an ecosystem that we can overall prove is working, right? So if we're talking about the overall way that it's working, podcast, unfortunately, does then get folded into, to date, predominantly audio, obviously increasingly your video budget. So when you look at it from an MMM perspective or econometrics, that's what I mean about these marketing theory statutes still hold. And I think it's worth not chucking them away or kind of dismissing them because they don't have quite as refined digital level of attribution. But I would say that the hacks that you've talked about, you talked about promo codes, for example, of course, kind of direct product embeds, even things like, A/B testing, geolocation testing, and so on. But they are workarounds. We kind of believe that this is going to work because of the way in which we understand that people consume podcasts. So let's give ourselves enough proof and clout with which to say it exists on a plan. And the better we can do with that, and I'd love to hear Pat's perspective on this, the better we can do with that, of course, the better. And there's always the cynical client in the room who's like, I don't know, I don't listen to podcasts. And with that issue, you then get into a whole thing of, okay, now we need to go into the rigor and the rationale. Which Podscribe, I believe, is
I think that's a great point. And, I think there's always a need to step back a little bit as well and think about who is having that discussion and where they are with their advertising. If they're trying to justify audio or podcasts, then having a more high-level discussion about does this channel work is sort of more applicable. But if somebody's already in it, I think that is, definitely where you need to be able to get into, did this drive a sale? Did this particular show drive a sale? And it helps brands get down to that more finer level of detail and understanding their actual media plan a little more so, and trying to kind of optimize and figure out what's best rather than does this channel work in general.
My worry, of the challenge we've got, not my worry, but the challenge I think we've got is talking about the video piece in isolation versus the wider buy, the wider campaign performance. And I think that what we've got to do, in my opinion, is try and get rid of some friction in terms of how it's being measured and what we're measuring, so that we've got some sort of common language. So that because I always think of this as, well, who's the planner, who's the buyer, who's the client, what are they actually trying to do? And we've got to remember that we are part of a wider media plan, and of course, that media that has a smooth path to purchase or a smooth kind of measurement, even though nothing is perfect, right? There isn't. I have yet to see a measurement say that's 100% perfect. As long as we're moving in the right direction, that's going to be the first steps, I think, for us to kind of start opening up the missing money, because Glenn and I had a chat. It is billions, right? Potentially, right? Crazy. The opportunity is we're not. I don't think we're overreaching to mention that is the opportunity. The amount of opportunity that we have is huge, but we need to have some sort of collective movement towards. We have to play the game to an extent. We have to understand that we are going to be measured against other media as well.
Yeah, but to that end of playing the game, I think we have to find ways to work with YouTube and work within YouTube's ecosystem. We've talked about this. There are already people that are claiming, we figured out this hack, this workaround, we can get this. I think any of that's going to be shut down. Brands that I work with wouldn't test something that was kind of gray area. No one wants to draw the wrath of Google or YouTube. But I do think that there are creative ways we can do this. One thing that I literally came up with last night and was frantically writing down was saying that because we're doing so much modeling with video results versus audio results, is saying, could we even run separate promo codes on the audio version of the show and the video version of the show? That way on audio we get segregated results of direct code usage from the audio version, IPs from the audio version, and then we can take the code usage from the video version and do some modeling there that's more one-to-one and less murky.
Yeah, no, we were talking about this earlier. I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think, and that kind of goes back to the earlier point about this is a tricky time right now. Again, as like the industry is moving quickly into this medium that isn't necessarily totally cut and dry in terms of measurability, being able to find the advertisers and the publishers who are willing to kind of set that kind of stuff up, right? Because that does take, there is an operational lift associated with having different promo codes on your audio versus your video. And having the brands and partners who are willing to help set that up is key. It's figuring out these solutions.
But I would tell you, I think doing things like that, doing these studies, will give us more, to really just do smarter modeling brands can feel more comfortable and secure with. And to that end, I know Paul from Signal Insights mentioned that he has a white paper coming out, a study talking about seeing a greater lift in video than in audio, even where there's already healthy awareness. So I very much look forward to that. Because I do think as marketers, right, we tend to latch on sometimes to studies or latch on to articles. And the idea of even an average CPM is $25 in the podcast industry came about from one blog written in the early 2010s by John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneur on Fire. And that blog caught wind, and literally that is why everyone started their pricing at that level. So I think more strong studies are going to help, greater brand confidence in this. But I know we're coming up against time here, so one thing I want to ask, and this might be controversial with different viewpoints here. So most attribution is charged on a CPM basis, where most host-read ads are bought on a flat fee against impression guarantees. With that in mind, that disconnect can sometimes make it tough to budget and eat margin. I'll start with you first, Pat. Who should pay for attribution?
Very nice.
It's a softball, right? No, I think, I mean, just seeing who we work with, we kind of see it spread across all parts. When I was on the publisher side, I was always pushing to have us cover it because it allowed us to kind of have that extra selling point to come through. I know certain advertisers are going to want to go in because they want to sort of own that relationship. They want to have all the level of visibility. And I think that is usually the factor that comes into most of it, is usually the person that pays for it gets the most visibility into the results. So I will say we try to make be inherently flexible with that, depending on who wants to cover the costs. So if an agency wants to cover it and they want to share some data with the publishers,
wants to cover it.
So some of them do, but it's but we offer varying levels of visibility into the results. So it could be sort of like, hey, we have a dot method where you're like, if you're green dot, you're the top third, yellow dot, middle third, red dot, lower third. So it sort of gives people a directional understanding of where they're performing compared to the rest of the folks in the mix. And then there's a lot of tools that we offer that are a little, it's sort of how the sausage is made. And maybe like an advertiser doesn't necessarily need to see that. That can be something that's more predicated towards the agency. So I think it depends on who wants to get their hands dirty.
Andrew, how does Audio Boom feel about picking up 10 million impressions on a Tim Dillon episode that goes viral?
I mean, I don't want to sit on the fence on this one, but I kind of am. Because I know, it's terrible, isn't it? I think that I agree with Pat to an extent. It kind of sits with us to an extent, right? I still think we have got a lot of proof to deliver back into the agencies and the clients. I think that we, over the last, I would say 5 or 6 years, we've kind of arrived in the room. Podcasting has arrived in the room. We're getting briefs. Brands are opening up. The brand count for everybody in this room that has a network, I think, is growing quarter on quarter, if not month on month, which is all great. But the biggest problem we've got is still efficacy and performance. And I think that the onus predominantly lies on us to kind of pick up on some of that cost. However, the client also needs to kind of meet. I think often they need to kind of meet us halfway. I think in some of the instances, I often say, if you treat podcasting like a short-term opportunity, it will behave like one. Whereas actually, I think we're more than just a short-term channel. Therefore, attribution is really important. But I think it will depend on the brief, it will depend on the client, and it depends on the ambition of the business. Audio Boom, we're very ambitious. You know, if we have to pay, we will pay.
And Lucy, to that end, are you comfortable if a network were to pick up the attribution costs, but it meant that the network could get access to the client results in addition to the brand of the agency?
Ooh. The old case study requirement, I suppose. I guess I'm just asking the question, I guess, which is, who is asking the question? Who wants what from the attribution, right? Yeah. If it's about you guys proving the case of podcasting, which is kind of what you're saying, then I would say the onus is on you to prove that case. Ultimately, I don't think there's anybody who's signing up to invest in a plan without fundamentally believing that plan is, at least at a kind of macro level, going to work. We believe that investment in marketing works. Increased share of voice within a category means increased share of market ultimately. There's a direct piece of, there's so much academic theory that proves that out. So if all you're doing is saying, hey, our marketing also works, I think it's a fairly weak question that I would not be jumping on the bandwagon to try and encourage my clients to pay for, if I'm being really candid. If, however, the premise is about saying, okay, you want us as a proposition, as a network, ACOS for example, to work to an outcomes basis, maybe a CPA, or really just about determining, okay, how much overarching influence did we have on the bottom line, then yes, I think then you have a much greater opportunity for party share, because you are affording the client the opportunity with which to not only drive their bottom line, but also understand what improves that ROI, for example, moving forward, and hopefully really embrace all of the brilliant benefits of being in the podcasting space. I don't want them to, kind of your point, Andy, to just reduce it down to a numbers game, when I think there is so much clout and opportunity and contextual relevance and trust and great just richness that can be afforded by being in the space, that as a strategist, that's the story I would start with.
That's exactly where I think we should all be landing, is exactly that. I don't want us to kind of pitch here, right, as an industry. We've got to be pitching right at the very top, because this attribution is really important. But as a channel, it is incredibly unique. There is no other media like podcasting, or even video podcasting. It's totally unique. The way and the relationship that then the brand taps into with the host and the audience is entirely unique, and I just don't want us to come up short.
I would also say any argument which starts with client should, you're already going to lose. So don't go down there. You'll just end up frustrated without the money that you want.
Yeah. One thing I would say to leave it on is that, one, I think everything gets offset in negotiation, right? And whether a network is picking it up or giving a rebate or giving a discount to offset it, I think there's ways to make it work. But one thing I would leave marketers with right now, and creators as well, is I think there's unlimited supply right now, especially in the world of YouTube and audio. It is truly a buyer's market. There's a lot of opportunity, but because those who will get ahead of the game will be figuring out this next level of smarter modeling, of working with YouTube if it's a large creator that has pull, especially with Spotify or YouTube. I think that there are opportunities right now to collaborate and experiment, especially if you can get creators that are giving access to better metrics through the Creator Studio in terms of watch time, peaks, valleys, most replayed segments. There are ways to get more signal in to where essentially we can distill better modeling going forward. But most importantly, because it is YouTube sandbox, I think whatever we settle upon as the way forward is going to be something that they're going to have to be okay with, or else it won't sustain long term.
Good.
Great.
Let's leave it there.
Agreed.
Thanks, everybody.